Jennifer has asked a question about contract versus full-time. I guess my thoughts on this are that contract is just such a small market in the corporate security world. You do get some people that, you know, set up on their own and do very well, but they tend to be very, very well networked. Contract is great, and people love the flexibility and the fact that you're, you know, paid a day rate and probably earning more money, potentially working on some interesting projects. But they always forget that you've got to do the business development to actually get those contracts in the first place. So it's not kind of start one contract, finish it, start another one, finish it. There's quite often lean times, which you have to take into consideration with the earnings as well. And I think purely in kind of volume terms, we see an awful lot more full-time jobs than we do contract. And quite often, if, you know, pick a random company, if BP are going into Angola, they will just hire someone like Control Risks or, you know, one of the other big consultancy firms to do the work for them rather than hire individuals. So yeah, personally, I think the full-time side is definitely a bigger market in this. You know, if you look at cyber, contract is a massive thing there. It's just not really on the corporate side, the security side of things. I don't know if you agree with that, James.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I think it's a hard. The contract business is, like you say, you can make, especially in the more kind of benign regions, right? And I think even the more austere environments, when you get into Africa, it gets. I know you get involved in rotations and that sort of thing. It's a little different there, but generally, you know, as Chris said, there are a couple of people that really have got there, especially maybe in the embedded market as well. In the intel world, that's a big thing. But we just don't see the contracts as much anymore. Hopefully, we'll see it more because it's great from a business standpoint. But we don't really see it.
Yeah.
This
is a question we get asked all the time about qualifications. I would say qualifications are probably becoming less important in terms of kind of job requirements. Probably 10, 15 years ago, we would see you'd always get kind of CPP or CFE preferred at the bottom of a job description, particularly from an American firm. And we definitely see that less these days. I don't think having any qualifications is a bad thing, but I strongly suspect that it's just a kind of nice to have. I'm not sure that it's, you know, if there's you versus another down to the final two in a job interview process, it's more about personality and cultural fit than it is about who's, you know, paid the money, spent the time to do a qualification. The one, I guess, potential exception to that is that we are seeing more and more interest in people doing security roles that are very business focused. So doing an MBA, I think, is a really positive thing. And, you know, the number of people with MBAs in this world is limited. So that's a real positive. But I think, again, it's not you quite often see really senior job adverts asking for CPP. The fact that if you kind of do a bit of a scroll around the ASIS membership, there's kind of security officers at hotels who have a CPP. I'm not sure it's a sign that you are significantly above another person. It's you know, it's good that you put the time and effort in. You've done the reading. You probably have a bit of knowledge off the back of that, but I'm not sure it's ever going to get you a job.
It's a moment in time as well, right? We had this question, and we sat down. We were in the ACSG last year, and we got really deep into this. And I think they all serve a purpose, depending on what stage you are in your career, and that will be that timing dictates how additive they are, right? You know, I think so. I don't know, like any of the anything, maybe CPP is at a certain point is great, and then that will become. Sometimes you'll find, to Chris's point, that the organisation, maybe the CSO, has it and really values it, and will look to drive it. It just depends where you are. What stops me if I'm looking at, say, like an MBA or something, and it ties into. There's a question here that said, what are the newer trends you're seeing in the roles that are being filled? I'll come back to that. But what skills, hard or soft, are being sought after? I sat down with 7 or 8 CSOs 10 years ago and asked this question, and then I sat down with them a little while ago, same thing, and the same thing came up, same answer came up about soft skills. That's it. We're doing some work at the moment for a company that's huge footprint, rest of the world role, and they want someone that will be able to kind of go out there and knit everything together. A lot of the time, the hard skills, especially if you're in a similar role, are almost a given, right? It's are you going to be, and it's not about fit. It's just, are you going to be, are you going to have the right soft skills to be successful in the organization? We've got 3 regional roles at the moment, all covering EMEA, kind of rest of the world, and they all offer a different candidate experience when you're in the business. That, through a degree of, through different degrees of maturity from a departmental standpoint, but also what works. And what works kind of culturally. So I think soft skills are huge. Harder to articulate, but you just have to work harder at the front end when it comes to contextualizing your own experience against the what the company is looking for. That makes sense.
I'm just going to answer this question quickly. This is obviously quite UK specific. So Silvano's asked about companies helping people get work visas in the UK. I think this is the same with anywhere you go in the world if you want to relocate. So if there is a skill set shortage or there is a lack of people who can do the job locally, you're always got a much greater opportunity to get sponsored to go into that country. The UK, it's a massive market. There's security professionals coming out of your ears. And companies are naturally lazy. So if they are looking for a regional security manager out of London, they're definitely going to hire someone in London or nearby already rather than sponsor a work visa, which is going to take time and cost money. So it is a bit of luck of the draw. Some companies are more open to it than others. But the reality is that not that many firms sponsor work visas coming to the UK these days.
Yeah, agreed. Susanna, you asked a question about CV versus LinkedIn. I feel like this is my specialist subject. Someone said to me once, and I don't know who it was, but I'm going to start taking credit for it soon, that your CV is what you have and LinkedIn is what you want, which I thought was, if you think about it, it's kind of key, right? When you look at how organizations go to market now, really rudimentary Boolean search, are you able to be found, right? That's what it comes down to. I think LinkedIn can be a bit more of an interesting narrative, a story, tell a tale. It doesn't replicate your CV. If it replicates your CV, it generally looks really, really dry and boring. LinkedIn, tell a story, be approachable, have your contact details on there. People lose sight of that all the time. A lot of the time when organizations are recruiting for a security director today, they're not going to recruit another one for 4 years. They're not going to connect to you, and be stuck with 500 security professionals in their network that they're never going to use again. So if your contact details aren't readily available to be viewed by second connections, third connections, fourth connections, they might not have the juiced up in-mails. Every I think it's £2 an in-mail, Chris. I don't know, but they stack up really, really quickly. So unless you're outstanding, are they going to waste their budget? So I think your LinkedIn and CV are completely different things. The CV is a kind of a movable, like live document, right? Because if we're applying for a job at, I don't know, let's say Apple, they're going to want something very, very different. I've only got Apple products, to be honest with you guys, but they're going to want something very different from Microsoft, right? Presumably. So you need to be able to amend that and play with that CV, make that a bit more malleable, if you like. The LinkedIn's the window into your world, right? That's what that is.
Yeah. And you'd be amazed the amount of companies who have talent acquisition teams who will just be scooting around on LinkedIn looking for people, and they don't have the technical knowledge of what this person does versus what that person does. So they're just looking for keywords. It's much like applying for a job on a company website. You end up with HR, they don't understand the concepts. they don't understand, the nuances of a corporate security CV. They've just got, 5 bullet points, and they're looking for people that match those. So if you don't have it on your LinkedIn profile to be found online, or have it on your CV when you apply for something, you're not going to get through to the next stage. So, Stephen's asked. Okay, do this one, then that one. So, so short roles on a CV. It can be tricky. I mean, we see great people who just have a real run of bad luck where, they join a company, they make people redundant, they join another company, they get sold and cut jobs. So it is a thing, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you are naturally job hoppy, but if people read it and you don't explain why you've changed jobs, they will just assume you're going to stick with them for 6 months and adjourn elsewhere. So I think, just write the bit about your current role, and then write a line underneath why you left. You can't control whether they believe that is the case, but whether you've left because you've been made redundant, people join companies and they have ethical issues with their behavior and decide to leave rather than stick around and get caught up in that, then, there are many reasons people leave companies, but if you don't explain, no one's going to know, and they're going to make assumptions. So I think you do need to explain a bit.
I think the flip side as well of that is people often, so you've got to get away with it once, right? When it becomes 2 or 3 times, it becomes a little hard. So there's an argument there about making better decisions, and that's something to talk about. I think sometimes people say to me, I've been here a year and a half, and I've been here 2 years. Is that too soon? Like, life is short. Okay, this is if you're been there for 2 years and you are unhappy, then life is very short. And I often say to people, just do what you got to do, what makes you happy, right? And get on with life. Waiting for an arbitrary 3-year period because we read it on LinkedIn once, like who knows what happens. So yeah, be happy, but just do it once. Do it 2 or 3 times. It's become a little tricky.
As you started that question, I interrupted.
I was going to say, the physical security HSE piece depends what you're applying for, George. Doesn't it? It's subjective, It depends. I think some organisations, the two things are inextricably connected, but some they aren't. And if we just run a process, we're running a process at the moment where the feedback has been a bit too much HSE. So I think you really have to understand what you're applying for. And if you are genuinely kind of 50-50, I do this and I do that, you have to really, if it's an HSE job, pull out the HSE and draw on metrics that are going to be in your favor. Or physical security, same. But if you just send generic CVs, you will get bounced because people aren't going to ask you. That's the other thing. So Chris's point about talent acquisition people doing broader generic searches, there's this misnomer that if they want to know, they'll ask, right? Like you presume they just ring you, and they won't. They'll just move on because there's a billion people looking for a job at the moment in the security world. But there always has been. It's really easy to get your head above the parapet. Right? Bar's pretty low.
Yeah. It's also worth saying that some sectors, HSE and security, are linked more significantly. You'll find in a lot of functions, the CSO will report into legal or HR or operations or whatever, but in oil, it's generally into HSE. So if you have that kind of double hatting, that kind of oil extractive world, security is important, safety is even more important. So that's definitely an area to look at. Carlos has asked about a bit more about courses. I mean, I think whatever course you do, you just want to do something that people recognize. So, if you're going to do a generalist security management course, the two big internationally recognized ones these days are the CPP, which is, been around forever, or the CSMP, which is a more recent thing. From my limited understanding, so I've never done either. CPP is a lot of reading, and then, as we would have said at school, a multiple guess questionnaire. The CSMP, I think you have to write like 12 essays over a year. So I personally, I think you probably learn more from the CSMP.